Joining us now is Richard Convertino. He is a former federal prosecutor. We're seeing a lot more officers charged with things like civil rights violations, particularly since George Floyd. What goes into recommending charges like this?
Well, the difference in the civil rights violations charges by the federal government are, as was pointed out in the previous report, was that in the state system, it is a assault and battery. It's a misdemeanor. What we saw, as egregious as it was, as uncalled for as it was, shocking as it was, is a state law violation of assault and battery, which is a misdemeanor. In the federal system, that misdemeanor becomes a violation of somebody's civil rights, and that's elevated, therefore, to a violation of the Constitution, which is a felony. And the fines are stiff and the penalties are very heavy for a violation of. It's under 42 United States Code Section 1893.
So because of the civil rights aspect to it, or violation of that, that's why it's a federal case and not a state case?
Yes, a federal case based upon the violation of civil rights.
Okay, what is your reaction to seeing that video?
Well, the first, I've tried many use of force cases. I've defended police officers and federal agents, and I've prosecuted them as well.
Yeah.
Almost always, at first blush, they look horrible. But when you get into the case and the facts of the case, there's usually, or I want to say in the cases I've had, as a defense attorney, justifiable use of force. The use of force continuum, which is promulgated by the Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards, or MCOLS, has a very specific way that an officer must react, but these are highly emotional, very immediate responses that occur. Often there's a high risk of danger to the officer or perceived risk of danger, so they're almost immediate reactions, but that still can be a very violation of one's civil rights. Now in this case, I can't find any justification whatever. This guy, went from the hip with his punch. It was unprovoked, other than words maybe, but totally uncalled for, and I can see no justification, law enforcement justification, whatever, to mitigate that.
Do you think if that video had sound, the outcome could have been different?
I think if the video had sound, you'd see what provoked the officer.
Right, yeah.
But there is literally no excuse. He could have, what he said about his mother, who knows? Mm-hmm. There's no excuse whatever to raise the level of force when it's totally unnecessary and uncalled for.
Yeah, that seemed like a very aggressive movement.
Extraordinarily
against somebody
aggressive.
a lot smaller.
A lot smaller, and had no ability to defend himself. It came out of nowhere, and immediately, you could see that the officer, I think, was building up, his anger was building up, and those are the kind of people that, unfortunately, cannot be law enforcement officers.
Yeah, well, this will be a story that we'll definitely be following. But another one that we're wanting to ask you about, federal prosecutors filed a criminal complaint against the man they believe is connected to the death of 2-year-old Winter Cole Smith. Rashad Trice is being accused of kidnapping, resulting in a death, and kidnapping a minor victim. Now, it is important to note the official cause of death for Winter Smith is still under investigation by the medical examiner. Law enforcement is hoping those results will shed more light on the case. But if convicted of kidnapping resulting in death, the majority minimum life is life in prison. To give us more insight on these charges, we're now then going to ask you, the death penalty has been thrown around a lot concerning Trice, but to date, Michigan hasn't put anyone to death. So do you think that is even really a possibility?
Well, not in Michigan. The death penalty in Michigan is outlawed by the Constitution specifically. So there is no death penalty in the state of Michigan.
Okay.
The death penalty, the discussion of the death penalty now is because the federal government usurped the control of this case, and they're charging him under the United States Code Section 1201, I think it's A1, which allows them to charge kidnapping, seizing, unlawfully taking of somebody for ransom or reward that affects interstate commerce. So there are a lot of nexuses. Each element of a crime has to be proven by the prosecution beyond a reasonable doubt, which includes the kidnapping. the interstate commerce connection, which I believe they're going to try to use the use of the the interstate commerce, the interstate highway, I'm sorry, and also the use of the automobile. They charged in the complaint that the automobile was manufactured in Canada, specifically charging that, I think, as an interstate nexus. It's, it's speculation, but I think that's why that's in there.
Yeah.
They also have to prove that the kidnapping was done for ransom or reward.
Yeah.
And all of those are elements that have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, and if he's not willing to volunteer that information, that sounds like it would be difficult to prove.
It may be difficult to prove the intent. The purpose of the kidnapping itself could have been a rash, obviously unthought. No thought was put into that, but maybe he was going to keep the child for ransom or reward in some way, or maybe it was just a totally unconscious, crazy thing to do.
Yeah.
But there are 60 separate felonies in the federal system that require or call for the death penalty. But once the death penalty, it doesn't have to be charged for the death penalty statute to be put into effect, or the ramifications of the charge. In this case, because it's death penalty qualified, the prosecution has to prepare what's called a prosecution memorandum, which is a lengthy proof of your case. It has to be submitted to the Capital Case Unit in Washington, D.C., has to be reviewed by senior attorneys in the Department of Justice. Then it has to be, they have to make a recommendation of whether to proceed, and the ultimate decision on whether the death penalty will be applied in this case or any case lies solely with the Attorney General.
Now, this is not to come across as insensitive at all, but we've seen a lot lately of mass shootings or children getting killed. What about this specifically? Do you think why they want to go after a death penalty in this case versus so many others that we talk about?
Well, it's a high-profile case. It's gruesome. It's disgusting. Personally, I'd like to see this guy get sentenced to 3 days in the electric chair. I mean, that's what the emotions that it evokes when you hear about this 2-year-old girl, beautiful 2-year-old girl, kidnapped, beaten, tortured, and killed and thrown in an alley. Evidently strangled by the use of a power cord that he had in his vehicle at the time. So it's beyond words to describe the horrific circumstances that surrounded this crime. It's high profile, and I think that's what's driving it. The circumstances, the high profile nature of the case, and the people are just up in arms over such a loss of an innocent life.
Yeah, it is. It's disturbing to even think about. Thank you so much for your thoughts on all of that. I certainly appreciate you. Now, in the meantime, to catch you up, Trice is set for his next court appearance to face federal charges in Grand Rapids tomorrow morning. He will be back in front of a judge Thursday in Lansing for the charges that he's facing for the brutal attack on Winter's mother. We can't leave that out either. Richard, thank you for joining us and providing your insight.
Thank you.
All right.